Thanks everyone. My name's Andy, and so this presentation for me is kind of, it's new. It's the first time I've done it. I've done a lot of slideshows about certain expeditions or trips, or I've done clinics about certain things, but I've never sort of like had this much time to spill. Exactly what I'm gonna do up here is spill for you guys. So I put together kind of a coming of age show, kind of like a self-evaluation but group therapy kind of thing. So we're gonna learn a lot of things tonight, things that are invaluable to me. And it's gonna be kind of strange, probably not like most shows here, but I assure you that it's okay. And so the first question that I get asked is, how did you get such an awesome job, man? And I think that's a pretty common question for someone that is an adventure photographer and gets to travel and shoot action sports and things. And the question to that generally, up to this point, is I don't know. I usually say that. Usually I'm like I don't know how I got this job. Like, you know, I was a climber. I wanted to become a photographer. I quit my job, bought a camera, and I hit the road. And that's kind of the truth, and it's kind of, but I knew there was something a little bit deeper there. And so I did a little evaluation, and I decided I should have started asking myself some important questions that people generally ask me. When did I first pick up a camera and start shooting? Well, generally I say in 2007, I quit my job in the restaurant. I cashed in my 401k, I went and bought a camera, a Nikon D40X, and I hit the road and started shooting rock climbing. But that wasn't really the truth. I began searching for like an earlier answer to that question. And I knew it wasn't gonna be pretty. So it turns out I did use a camera back in the day, an old little Kodak film camera, and I would generally give it to my buddies to photograph me holding the fish that I caught. And my buddies and I, all we cared to do was fish. We would take pictures of the fish we caught, and I guess I was a photographer. There I had a passion, I had a subject, and I had access. And believe it or not, things really haven't changed for me that much. I mean, back when I started photographer, my photos could tell you exactly how big the fish I was catching were, just how grand my adventures were. I was a documentarian, I guess, and I didn't realize it. And the other question I thought I should ask myself, because people ask me this, when did I know I wanted to be an explorer? Generally, I say, I don't know. The first time I went out and experienced something magical out in the mountains, or the first time that I had an experience with a buddy and we got to a summit and we saw the sunset. Those things are probably what keep me going, but I think I wanted to be an explorer, and I told you this wasn't gonna be pretty, probably about the same time that I was just kicking around old muddy farm ponds in Virginia with my buddies. There's a sense of adventure about it, and as I grew up, I was fishing, and I was shooting photos, and this is me with a catfish. And so I lived in Virginia, and me and my buddies fished, and as I got bigger, the catfish got bigger, and I was so obsessed with catching the biggest catfish that, believe it or not, I actually one day caught the biggest catfish anyone had ever caught in the state of Virginia. And I gave my buddy my camera, he took a photo of me, and lo and behold, no one cared. No one cares still. Local paper didn't run anything. There was no Facebook, no blogs, I couldn't share it. I just scanned this thing for the first time. It was like been in a box. So I wanted to be a photographer, I knew it. I didn't know it at first. I figured Colorado was gonna be sweet enough that I could just take my guitar out there and I could travel, and then whatever I wanted to do would just show its pretty little head. But it didn't at first. It didn't at first at all. But then finally, it did. I started climbing, and I spent years and years rock climbing. And I got good. I was traveling with some of the best climbers in the world at the time. And I started taking pictures again. I started taking photos of my buddies and I rock climbing. And so I went out and I bought a camera. And that's the camera I bought. It's 2 megapixels. And again, I didn't know anything about photography. I just wanted to shoot me and my buddies climbing. Well, I was shooting enough of my buddies climbing that one day I was working at the restaurant, and this was 2006, and I got a call. It was like 3 in the afternoon, and I was prepping. I was cooking. I was a good cook. I had like multitasking. I had things in the blender. I had things on the stove, things in the oven. So I get a call. I take the call. It's a woman, and she works for marketing at this company called Black Diamond. And that's, they make skis, they make climbing apparel. And she was like, Andy? I was like, yes. She's introduced herself as the marketing photo editor at Black Diamond. And she had a photo of mine that came off of that camera. I don't know how it came off that camera because I didn't have a computer at the time. One of my buddies had taken the card out and like uploaded the photos and sent one of those photos to his sponsor, which was Black Diamond at the time. So they say don't give your photos away. Well, people stole my photos, and that's how it all started for me, basically. Anyway, so I was on the phone with the lady, and she was like, we got this photo you took of your buddy Chuck. And I was like, okay, I think I know the one. She's like, we want to use it for the catalog. And I'm like, what? Okay. She was using words like high res. I didn't know what that was. High res, international rights, distribution, just words I had no idea what she was talking about. But I'm like, yep, okay. So she's like, can you send me the high res? And I'm like, yep, of course. I had no idea what it was. Asked someone, I'm like, do you know what a high res photo is? They're like, yeah. It's the raw photo out of your camera, And I'm like, okay. So I was like, what do you have exactly? She's like, I have the low res, like the compressed version. You could hear almost like the laughter just building behind on the phone. And I was like, well, I took it with the camera. It should be good. She was like, what camera did you take it with? And I was like, digital camera, has a memory card. She's all SD card. You could just hear wanting to laugh. And I was like, yeah. Took it on the CyberShot. Turns out she had the high-res file. And it was about 40K. And there was no way that she was going to print it. So I was like, oh, okay. Before she hung out, I was like, excuse me, ma'am, just out of curiosity, how much money were you going to pay me for this photo? She used other terms I didn't know at the time. Quarter page, international distribution, things. I'm like, okay, $600. $600. That's 2 weeks of work for me in the kitchen at the time. And this was the shot. This is the high-res photo. It's as big as it gets, even on my computer. And it's just a buddy climbing, right? They liked it. They wanted to use it. They couldn't use it. So I thought to myself, $600 is 2 weeks of work. She was like, may I suggest something? If you're going to travel around with your buddies like Chuck and people like that and shoot climbing, get a real camera because you got a good eye for it. And you might as well be shooting it on something that matters. And so I took that very seriously, and I went right into the kitchen and I quit my job. I gave him 2 weeks notice. And then I went right down to the HR department because I had a 401k, and I was like, oh, I'll cash that in and I'll buy my first camera, my first real camera. Turns out that's like highly unrecommended by HR. You pay these penalties and taxes, didn't matter, gimme. I got my money, I bought a camera, and I hit the road. And I started shooting my buddies climbing. The first place I went is this place, Bishop, California. And I was shooting with my buddy, his name's Kevin Jorgensen. And he was doing like really tall, cool, ropeless climbs. And no one had really heard of him. I went down there, I packed my car, I drove right down there. I shot this and I sent it to the climbing magazine as soon as I got back. And they put it on the cover. And I got the feature article of that issue. And I was fired up. I made my $600 for that month, which is about all I needed to stay on the road and sort of put gas in my car and feed my dog and such. So for the next 4 years, I traveled and I shot rock climbing. And I wasn't shooting anything else. It's kind of like when I started shooting fishing. I never shot the fishing, I only shot the fish. So even at this time here, I'm still just shooting like the hardest moves on the route. I was always top down, getting the shot. I wasn't shooting any lifestyle, I wasn't shooting any, I wasn't being a journalist. I was being an action photographer. I knew these photos sold to the climbing magazine. That's how I thought as a photographer. But I saw a lot of cool places. I met a lot of great friends. And I hung out on the side of a cliff for an embarrassing amount of my young adulthood. But it was rad. I mean, the access that I have to these people and these friends of mine was absolutely incredible. And I shoot ice climbing, and I spent a lot of time like here. I even rigged myself a little bench seat, tied it off on a rope so I wouldn't have to hang in my harness and cut the circulation off my butt. And I got really used to it. That was kind of like my life for a while. And in fact, I was selling so many photos to Climbing Magazine at the time that they created a position for me. Like, okay, you're senior contributing photographer, and we're gonna pay you $500 a month to just stay on the road and contribute to the magazine. And to me, that was awesome, because I was just trying to sell one photo a month. I was like, okay, this is great. I wasn't too smart, really, if you think about it. I mean, I was working every day in the most crazy locations. I was making $500 a month. But what was happening was I was getting published a lot. And I was on retainer. They were using my images. I was getting covers. Advertisers in the magazine started buying images. My name was spreading in the climbing world. But I didn't know anything else. I just knew rock climbing, And I started to see that I was kind of making the same mistake I did when I was a kid. I was shooting the action, but failing to capture sort of the bigger picture, like what we're even doing out there. Like, why are we even up here? Like, what is the point of climbing this impossible rock climb, What's the point of me even shooting it? I started to ask myself some questions. And I was starting to get a little bit tired of being on the road. Maybe 4 years, 5 years at this point. Working generally just for climbing magazines. And slowly I began to see other stuff. It took me a while to do it. But I didn't want to capture anything besides the cool rock climbing, because to me that's what was marketable. Like, the magazines wanted the cool rock climbing images, and I could do it in my sleep. I would set up a rope. I would, what's called Jumar, I would ascend the rope. I would ask the climber before they even left the ground, what's the hardest move on the route? They're like, you see up there by that flake, there's like a really dynamic left-hand move. That's probably the hardest move. I would just get up there and I'd wait for them to get there. As soon as they did the move, I'd shoot it. I'd lower myself down. I'd upload the photo. It wasn't enough for me. And I didn't have editors at the time to guide me in any directions. I wasn't even looking at other photographers' work outside of the industry. But I started to find myself choosing new positions on the wall and trying to find other angles besides the rock climbing. The climbing didn't even mean anything to me anymore. I would go out on trips and I wouldn't even shoot someone leading a wall anymore. And I started shooting rock climbers in the greater landscape of the sport. And I would shoot my buddies, like these things that I just forgot to shoot forever and ever and ever. I got a job to go down to this place called Waco Tanks, which is a big bouldering area, which is climbing without a rope, and shoot this Swiss guy named Fred Nicole, and he's like a climbing legend. He pioneered the most difficult rock climbs in the world. And the job was to shoot Fred at his old stomping ground. And we went out climbing with him for about a week, and this is the image that I liked the best of Fred, which was sort of like when he got back to this place, he found to be more at peace, like in his friend's dusty van, than he did amongst the cliffs. And it was sort of a story of nostalgia of a lifestyle that sort of has passed him. And images started to mean a little more to me, slowly but surely. In this small realm of climbing, I was finding softer moments and a new reason to be out there. and I found new stories to tell. I began to see rock climbing not as a sport anymore, but I started to see it as a lifestyle that I was a part of, a bigger picture, and it created new challenges for me. I began to see things in a different way, and this was a real growth for me. I wanted to be a photographer now, more than I cared about the $500. And sort of the progression from there, I started shooting base jumping and just getting amongst, like, having access was the most important thing, you know, and I still believe that is in you know, adventure, in any photography really, is that you have access to be able to make beautiful photos. And around the same time, DSLRs started doing video. The Nikon D90, this is like a couple generations after that. But the point being, I had a new way also to tell these adventures. I would shoot a photo, and then I would make a short film. And this was right around the same time that the climbing magazines, the one that originally sent me on the road, went out of business. They were all slimming their pages, advertisers were moving online, and it was really hard to sell climbing images anymore. And I think everyone who was working in an editorial at the time experienced sort of the same thing. People were filming themselves and putting it on their blogs, and hard, difficult rock climbing didn't have like a newsworthy aspect to it any longer. And so I started to realize that, well, if people are viewing everything online, this is perfect. I'll film their story and put it out online, and I'll sell advertising space for it. I'll contact the same sponsors. I would try to send a video, and they would sponsor the video. And I was able to sort of like grow creatively to be able to begin to be a filmmaker and also sort of keep things going for me. So a typical job, I would go out, I'd get a call from my buddy. This is my buddy Jonathan. This is outside of, this is somewhere in Nevada, like way in the middle of nowhere. But he would call me and say, Andy, I got this new route I'm doing. If I do it, it's the hardest thing that anyone's done in 5 years. And I'd drive right out there, I'd meet him, I'd get up on the wall, I'd shoot the same shot I'd get before, but I'd make a film about it too. And so I was just a one-man show, and just in doing that. And this is, we'll see if this works. This is sort of the storytelling of that last shot in video.
I don't always have great days, but just because they're not great doesn't make them any less valuable. After all, it's the contrast that makes life so beautiful. Any worthwhile success will always be predicated by countless acts of failure. To fail, I don't mind the word. It only means that you've got room to improve. See, I believe that you earn your keep, and at that, you should keep it close to you. Because in rock climbing and in life, you'll need it to carry you through those not so great days. If you want it bad enough, one day, your luck might change. Suddenly, all the hard work, all the highway miles, all the ruined sleep, all the battered skin, suddenly every tough moment is lost. And if only for an instant, you're weightless, content, and elated. I believe that everything worth living for is worth busting your ass for. Because when a great day comes along, it doesn't get much better. Your feet touch the ground, and you start to dream again.
And it was great. It was another avenue for me to make revenue, and I was beginning to grow as an artist. I was beginning to travel more, and I was beginning to see the bigger picture at this point. I wasn't just a kid in a car or a hillbilly in a John boat anymore. I think I was making photos that I thought were good, and I was starting to be recognized for it, and it meant a lot to me because it was a hard road through a difficult avenue to be able to even see the bigger picture. So I started using rock climbing as a way to experience other parts of the world in nature photography, and I started to see mountains in a different way. And I would go shoot the rock climbing job, and I would extend my ticket, and I would go shoot landscapes. And I would go shoot portraits, and I would visit local people, and I sort of had like a drive to just shoot everything in any way I could, learn techniques, do all these different things. And still, I think at this point, I was starting to see the world around me differently. I was starting to see myself differently, and I was starting to realize that my work was beginning to threaten my own identity, and that I was a far cry from, Virginia at this point. I needed bigger ideas, and I needed to interact with my work in a different way. And so I ended up traveling to the Arctic to find the answers to that. And I spent a lot of time in the Arctic in the last couple years. A place called Franz Josef Land, which is Arctic Russia. It's an archipelago of 190 islands north of Russia. It's just south of the North Pole. And I spent a lot of time there. I spent a lot of time in Greenland. I've spent a lot of time up in the Arctic Circle, finding just new subjects. Like, for me, it was like a meaningful place to be. It was difficult to get to, and I was creating images that to me meant something. And it's beautiful up in the Arctic. I mean, you just experience things. You see wildlife and animals and landscapes that, no one's accustomed to seeing on a regular basis. But with all that, I'm really starting to get a knack for like a deeper adventure. Putting myself out there a lot more than I did previously. And I began diving, and when we were in Franz Josef Land, I was with a group of scientists who wanted to take a sample under this giant iceberg. And this image is important because I'll show you the next short video clip where this iceberg it flips on us. The berg is probably as big as B&H, the building itself, and we were under it when it turned. But thankfully, we weren't under it when it turned. We were under it moments before it turned. One of the guys had a free flow with his tank, and we had to come up. And another little video clip of what happened that day.
If you get a recently grounded berg, it hasn't got a proper equilibrium, and it's just run up, maybe the tide's fallen, it's there, and if it's the first time it's grounded, it's going to fall.
Yeah.
But this grounded one is an old one with loads of old tide marks on it, and as far as icebergs go, it's stable.
Okay.
It's on the starboard side about half a mile.
In theory, we're going to go out and sample one of the icebergs by going underneath it and doing what they call a reverse transect, which is you go along the ice and we're going to be sucking microbes and shrimp and algae off the underside of the iceberg.
So I quickly looked at the berg and thought, doesn't look too bad. Looks fairly stable. why not? But it was a grounded berg, and I always get the willies around grounded icebergs. So I thought, well, it's as good as any other. Looked fairly stable, I must say. There'd been a technical problem with one of the divers. Forrest had a free flow, a non-disastrous emergency, but still a problem. Came up to the surface. We're all on the surface, and Murphy's Law, the berg rolled. Reverse! Watch up! Back! Backward! Back!
Everyone good?
Wow. So don't worry, we're safe here, don't worry.
Not your normal day at the office, the studio, I guess you'd say. But to me, that interaction was creating images to me that really meant a lot. And I shot this portrait on the way back in our Zodiac of this guy. His name's Alan Friedlander. He's one of the most experienced Arctic divers in the world. And we had a really close call. I mean, if it wasn't for one person having a mishap and everyone going up with him, we would have all been under the iceberg. And so I guess I told you how this is sort of like a group therapy, but self-evaluation. So I'm trying to figure this out too. Why this photo means a lot to me. And I think it's because the story, isn't the iceberg. Stories are human elements to me anymore. And I think this is the best photo I got from the trip. And no one would even know why that's a great photo, unless they were under that iceberg. And so I think photography has become like a real personal thing for me anymore, where I really want to experience what I'm shooting, what's in front of the camera. I want to feel what they're feeling. It's a new interaction for me. I'll give you another example of that. This July, I went on an expedition with this guy. His name's Mike Lebecki, and he's National Geographic Explorer of the Year, resident explorer at the Society. He's done over 60 solo expeditions. He's been called the modern-day Shackleton. And what I like about this photo is when you go on an Arctic expedition, you're so excited. If you raise the funds to go, or you got an output for your work, you're so focused on getting everything together, preparing. What am I going to wear? How am I going to stay warm? How am I going to keep my camera stuff charged? All that. There's a moment in an expedition where you leave safety, you leave sort of the comforts, and you have to sort of resolve anything in your own mind that needs to be resolved. And this is generally the point. When you're leaving, we're going somewhere, we're going to go explore Greenland for 30 days where no one has ever been. We're going to climb first ascents, and we're responsible for each other's lives. But this is a moment where Mike, who's a single father, he had a sat phone, and before we left the dock, he called his daughter, Lily, and she was crying, "Daddy, come home." She had a big soccer tournament. And Mike is an explorer. It's in his blood. He's been doing it since he was a kid. And I know that weighs heavy on him. I have conversations with my wife before I leave on an expedition for the 30 days and things like that. And I know what he was feeling right there, which is just give me 5 minutes, to just shake it off, and like reassure myself that this is the life that I chose and that I'm psyched. And 5 minutes later, Mike hops up and he's like so excited, and like we're just talking about all the things, we're organizing gear, and we had a great trip. But I guess the important part is that this is a photo of an experience that I felt and experienced, and those are to me, my best work anymore. So Greenland last month, or July, we set off. Immediately we hit locked sea ice. So to go where we wanted to go explore, there's this little window where this ice starts to break up, and the boat can just sort of crush through it. And it's also kind of dangerous because if a storm comes in, all that ice can sort of crush the boat. And we're prepared with dry suits and inflatable things. You know, like we'd probably be okay if a storm came in, but it's sort of the risk you take to get where you're going. And we hired this local Inuit guy. His name is Salo, and he wanted to guide us down there because he's a hunter, and he thinks that there's like a good chance that he'll shoot a narwhal down there, which would be for his family really valuable. He has a license to hunt one, and so he offered to take us. And Salo is quite the character. This is when we were the most nervous in what's called this thick brash ice, and sort of like some dark clouds are coming. And Salo is just like, he grew up in that environment, and I love him. I remember yelling at him. So we're on separate boats, but Salo's sort of guiding us and helping break the ice. Like, Salo, I'm like, I see a lot of ice out here. And he said to me, he said, I see a lot of water. And I think that's such a cool way to look at life. This is Salo. He's got a mosquito on his forehead, and he's not even fazed. The mosquitoes were so bad up there that he just imagined he grew up with it. And this expedition was really interesting. So I'm there with Mike Lebecki. We're shooting an assignment for National Geographic. I'm sort of capturing Mike in his element. I'm trying to tell the story of a solo expeditionist. And we're followed by a couple really big bears. Like, we wanted to get dropped off right on the other side of that iceberg. We had a couple bears following the boat. It just didn't seem like a good idea. So we ended up sort of moving around this island and finding a new fjord, new climbs, exploring around. Sure enough, more bears. They're so great. They seem so soft and cuddly when you're shooting them. They're so big and dangerous. Anyway, we set off. The boat drops us off, and we head to go climb both of those peaks we would like to climb. They're unclimbed. And so, but it doesn't look like there's any bears here. I mean, there's wildflowers. It's near 75 degrees most days. No chance. Even Salo says, no chance you'll see a bear back there. Like, they stay on the coast with the seals. Sure enough, we're running more gear to make an advanced base camp so we can sort of have a place staged where we can climb the peaks. And we find bear tracks all over our tracks, up and down. There's one in the valley, and he's checking us out. He's stalking us. And
bear tracks.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we have seen them? The light, I don't know. The light could have revealed them, but it looks like there's fresh bear tracks, and they're headed to my advanced base camp.
There's no mosquitoes, by the way. I don't know if you could notice that. Let me go back here and, okay.
Bear tracks. Why wouldn't we have seen them? The light, I don't know. The light could have revealed them, but it looks like there's fresh bear tracks, and they're headed to my advanced base camp. And we don't have a gun with us, and it's summertime, and if a bear hasn't eaten by now, well, why don't we just go back and to the gun right now, and then see what time it is.
Okay. What mosquitoes? So the worst part about filming, because that's the thing, you know, I got the DSLR, I can shoot a photo and I can get a clip. I'm always like, get a clip, that's my thing. Like, can I get a clip? Get a clip. And if you're stationary, they just come at you. Anyway, and then I turned around and crafted a photo that sort of told that story, you know? We went back and got the gun. There were new bear prints sort of circling right where we just had that conversation. We don't know where it was hidden, but it was sort of stalking us and driving us crazy. So we decided that the safest way down was to put on our dry suits. Again, no mosquitoes. And stick to the river. So we would shuttle a load up, and then we would inflate our inflatable kayaks, and we would come down the river just to avoid any run-ins with the bear, who was always there, big boy, hanging out. It sort of tortured us enough that killing a bear to me would be the absolute worst thing we could do out on this assignment. I mean, I couldn't imagine like having to shoot a bear. So you don't even want to put yourself in a situation where you would have to have that kind of interaction. But, you know, it's a very real threat. So Mike sleeps on a boulder. I sleep with a gun. And we just like, we're basically constantly like stalked and tortured by this thing, and we didn't get any rock climbing done. We just couldn't like navigate the valley safely to get all our gear up there, and it began to wear on us. And to me, this is my favorite photo of the trip. It's not climbing, but we ended up having to move our tent up to a ledge to safely sleep at night because the bear was in and out of the fjord, which was kind of a bummer because this is a big cook tent and you can hang out, and here's my tent where I get all the space I want to sleep. And every night Mike and I just had to go up about 100 foot up on this rock face and just sleep on a ledge. And this is Mike, who just woke up in the morning. He's just looking down, just making sure it's safe. We didn't sleep very well because we're obviously just crammed in this little one-man tent. And to me, this was my summer. I don't know if y'all had a great summer, but I did. And so the Arctic, I guess, is a special place for me. It teaches me a lot about storytelling. The next thing that I really wanted to experience growing up a fisherman, I'm a Pisces. I don't know if that factors in why I love fish so much, but I wanted to go photograph sharks. I just think they're the coolest subjects, and it would just be a surreal place to work and to shoot photos. So, like any good photographer, I get a call from a science expedition who wants me to come document the trip. Because I do photo and video. I'm a small production. I'm one guy with a camera. And they say, do you have experience diving? I'd say, of course, even though I don't. Have you ever swam with sharks? Of course. No. And I've done that a lot as a photographer. I think there's a certain growth about that. Maybe I could have been more honest in this situation, but. So I did. I said, yes, I got this. I went right to Boulder. Right, that's where I live, Boulder, Colorado. And there's a heated pool. This was in the winter. So I got certified in like a heated swimming pool. But I got my card and I was good to go. And the idea was they were just going to tag sharks. This was in Fiji in March. And so I got comfortable with an underwater housing, jumped in, and so this guy, his name's Sean, he's chumming for sharks to try to bring them up, and then they'd catch them on a rod and reel, bring them in, put a satellite tag on them, some samples, and release them. And this is Sean's way of chumming. He actually just gets in the water and like fillets fish. But there was no sharks. Like the scientists pick a place out in the deep blue, which is called the pelagic zone, to find sharks, to tag sharks, because that's where there have been a lot of overfishing. So weeks and weeks go by. I'm so ready to see a shark. We finally catch and tag a shark, and it's like this big. But I'm like kind of getting my shot. I mean, I pictured more like big shark, more open water, less hands, less boats, less hook and lines. But I was shooting a shark. I was feeling pretty cool about it. And so the trip ended, and we tagged one shark. And I was like, oh well, right? Better luck next time. My summer of luck was really running thin. Until I met this guy. His name's Papa. And Papa, he's a local priest at his village. He's also the caretaker of his local reef. And I got to talking to Papa, and he says, you want to see sharks? I'm like, yeah, I want to see sharks. He's like, I will go show you sharks. And little did I know, we'd go right out. This is his son, who's looking at me like, you have no idea what you're about to jump into. Well, we jump in, we sink to the bottom. We're going to go down to about 100 30 feet. So we were wearing a bunch of weight belts around our ankles, just so we can, he's like, you want to sink down and get to the bottom, and you want to just be there. He's like, there's going to be a lot of sharks when you jump in. But I'm kind of like, okay. There's no sharks in Fiji as far as I know, man. I've been here a month. This is as soon as we hit the bottom. And there was over 50 bull sharks that were 10 to 15 feet large. And these are two of the scientists that I went with. This is Papa's son. And you can see the bubbles. That just basically means panic. That means you're not breathing, you're sucking your air. Both of these guys are headed right for cover. They're going right to like a reef or something to just duck. But Papa's son's there and he's got his stick, so I feel pretty good. Anyway, before I know it, everyone is ducked for cover except for me. And they're here, safely behind this like reef wall, this dead reef wall. And I'm just sitting out there basically, and sure enough, the biggest of the bull sharks comes right up to me and comes and puts his nose right on my dome port, pushes me around a little bit, but doesn't show any sign of aggression like you would think like a shark should. I mean, it was more like wanting to cuddle in this kind of weird way. But he wouldn't look at me in the eye. She, I'm not sure. Never felt threatened at all. Basically would come, give me these beautiful passes. I was able to get great photos. And spent, the next 45 minutes just sort of out submitted to like what I wanted originally, which was this experience with to swim and photograph sharks. And it was totally surreal to be under there and spend time with them and photograph them. And I ended up doing 18 more shark dives last year because I just caught the fever of just being in such a quiet, still, amazing place. The access to the images that you're creating is very unique and very new to me. And I've just really fallen in love with sharks. And I've become comfortable around them and working with them. And in this March, I'm going to go do another project in the Bahamas with sharks. And yeah, they're awesome. And so this is me now. Notice the bubbles aren't just flying out, like no one's running for cover. I'm just doing a dive without the camera, just to be around sharks and experience them. And so that's sort of my new thing. It's sort of a return back to the water in a way for me, and it's a return back to fish. And some things obviously don't change that much. Some things don't stray far from where they began. And so yeah, well, thanks guys for helping me get through my self-evaluation of why I'm even here.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.